Hello everyone and welcome to an amazing game that just ended from the Tournament of Peace Round 6 that is being played in Zagreb, Croatia. It is Bulgarian Grandmaster Ivan Cheparinov with the white pieces against Hans, Moke and Niemann. And Hans is having a sensational tournament. He going into this round, he's on 4.5 out of 5, which is absolutely incredible at this level. And he's playing, like I said, Bulgarian Grandmaster Ivan Cheparinov, rated 2649, 10 points lower than Niemann. None of them are the top seed of the tournament is actually Anton Korobov at 2667. But yeah, we already covered 2 games by Hans. If you haven't seen them, check out in the previous video where I also discuss a little bit about the history of the tournament. Some of you found that very interesting, so if you haven't heard or seen it, do check it out. But yeah, let's check out this game. Only 25 moves, one slight mistake causes the loss of this game, so let's see what happened. So Ivan has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to c4. He goes for the English opening, knight to f6 with knight to c3 and pawn to e5. And the 2 knights variation of the English, knight f3 and knight to c6, going into the 4 knights variation of the English, g3, the so-called fianchetto line, and bishop to b4. We have knight to d5, bishop to g2 is the main move here. Cheparinov tries knight to d5 against Hans, and now we have pawn to e4. And this is very tricky, and not a lot of games featuring this move, but it has been played by some very strong players. For example, Levon Aroyan played it against Anish Giri, Vishwanathan Anand played it against Hikaru Nakamura, Kasparov played it against Lothier, Caruana played it against Yesipenko, and with mixed results. And here there are 2 ways of dealing with this. Sometimes knight captures on b4 was played, but nowadays it is known that knight to h4 is the top idea, because if you go for knight captures on b4 and knight captures on b4, then knight to d4, as the knight moved from the defense of the d4 square, for example, you will castle, and after a3 and knight to c6, you will double up black's pawns here. But it's not much. The e4 pawn is incredibly strong, so it prevents white from playing d4, and it's just going to be a very nice game for black. So knight to h4 is considered the main move here, which is what Cheparinov plays, and now we have castles and pawn to a3, asking what do you do with the bishop. And here there is one game that was actually played in the Grand Swiss that just finished between Parham Makhlouli and Raunak Sadvani. Sadvani played bishop to a5 and he won that game, but here we have bishop to c5, and it is now as of move 7 already that we have a completely new game. So one thing that's interesting about bishop to a5 that Sadvani played is that you cannot trap the bishop. b4, bishop to b6, and you don't have c5 because the knight on d5 would hang. And if you capture on f6 first with check, you still don't have this because the rook is hanging. And of course, if you play rook to b1, let's not forget about our good friend the bishop. You get checkmated on f2. So that's the point. Well, bishop to a5 is playable. The main move by the engine is retreating the bishop to e7, then to c5, then to d6, and only then to a5. So much like you would have in the Evans Gambit, for example. And now bishop to c5, we have bishop to g2, and now pawn to d6. We have castles, rook to e8, of course getting the rook into the game, adding more support to the e-pawn. And now d3. We have e captures on d3, and okay, like we said, this is like a big bone in white's throat. So if white can play d3 and nothing goes wrong, then white is perfectly fine. So Hans plays e captures on d3, and now queen captures on d3. You could also play e captures on d3, then let's say knight captures, bishop captures, and you play knight to d4. And this is now an incredibly strong piece. c6 will be played, bishop can come to h3, the rook controls the e-file. It's just a very strong position for black. So instead, queen captures on d3 is played, and now we have knight to e5, attacking the queen here, queen to c2, and now pawn to c6, chasing away the knight. And what do you do with the knight? The problem is, if you play knight back to c3, then you're no longer guarding the c4 pawn. And if you play knight captures on f6, then queen captures on f6, and again, how are you playing this? If you play something like pawn to e4, remember bishop to e6, and you don't have sufficient resources to defend the c4 pawn. Of course, b3 will be met with simple knight captures because that rook on a1 is always hanging since white waited so long with the development of the dark square bishop. So here, knight to c3 is played with the idea, okay, let Hans capture on c4, we're going to move the knight and we're going to have some pressure along the c file. and Hans goes for it. Knight captures on c4, and now knight to a4, putting pressure on the bishop and opening up an attack towards the knight. So Hans plays bishop to e6, he defends the knight, and now what you should play is just capture the bishop, which was your goal all along. Knight captures, d captures, and you play b3. You kick away the knight, knight goes back, and then you play rook to d1. The game continues. Black will always be a little bit better, as black is up a pawn, but okay, white does have the bishop pair, so all in all, should be an equal game. However, after bishop to e6, Ivan Cheparinov decided not to go for the capture right away. He wanted to improve the position first with rook to d1, as now knight captures on c5 will be a huge threat. The d-pawn is now pinned, but he missed one critical move by Hans that wins him the game. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Hans while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this brilliancy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop captures on f2 with check. And now I believe I can feel Cheparinov's pain when he saw this move, and he was like, why didn't I just capture on c5 first and then went rook to b1? Why did I play rook to d1 first and allow this abomination of a move? Because now you see all of the moves that are coming, like knight is coming to g4, knight is coming to e3, you control it twice. I mean, so many moves are now happening. And worst of all is a move that I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to see it for yourselves. Look at this. King captures on f2, and now knight to g4 with check. King to g1 is sort of the move that should be played here, but Cheparinov played king to e1, and now comes pawn to b5. And this is the move that makes it problematic, because there's no good way of solving the position here. Problem is, the natural knight to c3 is met with queen to b6. And now, how do you stop queen f2 checkmate? The knight is covering d2. You have to play something like e4 for the queen to cover the f2 square, but now pawn to d5, you open up the position, and the white king gets absolutely crushed here. Another thing you could, after b5, you could say, all right, let's just leave the knight here. Let's go bishop captures on c6, attack some rooks here on a8 and e8, but now just b captures on a4. That's the point. And if bishop captures on e8, you don't care. Queen b6, again, there is no defense here. Whatever you play is just insufficient. So that's the issue here. And so after this pawn to b5 move, Cheparinov said, all right, let's go rook to d4. And it is a very clever idea, because now if Hans just wins the knight on a4, then rook captures on c4 was planned. And if bishop captures, queen captures, then okay, white still can fight. Not a lot happening here. He does have two pieces for the rook, so he can fight. He does have a bit of a weak king on e1. Maybe he can survive this, but Hans will not allow it. After rook to d4, Hans plays knight c to e3 and attacks the queen and the bishop on g2. So of course you have to trade. The bishop captures on e3, other knight captures on e3, and now queen to c3. And now comes the real problem. You don't have to play queen to c3, but you don't really have all that many great squares. You could go to d2, then knight captures on g2 will be a problem, just followed by pawn captures on a4. So queen to c3 is played to put pressure on the knight here, but it doesn't really do all that much. And here Hans plays a very, very tricky move, bishop to d5. Not rushing anything, just defending his knight on e3, and the bishop here is much stronger than you would think. This is such a complicated line. Let's ask the silly question here, because asking dumb questions is actually how you grow and how you gain success in chess. What happens if we just capture it? Well, okay, let's play bishop captures on d5. The point is that after c captures on d5, and let's say rook d3, now you are asking the knight to move politely. There's this nasty d4 idea. And now if the queen captures, knight to c2 check wins the queen, and if the rook captures, then you are no longer threatening to win the knight. And now just rook to c8. You kick away the queen. You don't even have to play this. You kick away the queen. You play knight to c2 with a triple monster fork here. Then you capture the rook. Then you capture the knight. Or you just checkmate the white king. Anything is possible here. So that's why after bishop to d5, you can't just capture it. So what was played was bishop to e4. A very tricky move by Cheparinov, now disconnecting the rook, defending the knight on e3, threatening queen captures on e3. But Hans plays bishop captures on e4, queen captures on e3, and now just bishop back to d5 again. With deadly purpose. Now the queen has to move, and still b captures on a4. It happens at the end of the day. Queen to d2 was played, b captures on a4. And it's not that Hans won a piece or anything. Now it's equal material regarding pieces. Hans is up 2 pawns, but the white king is still in a terrible situation here. Rook captures on a4 was played, and now Hans played this very tricky rook to e5 move that serves many purposes. Now, at first glance, it seems like you're just planning to triple up here on the e-file, queen e7, rook to e8. But there is even a greater purpose here. Rook to d4 was played, and now Hans just nicely finished the game with pawn to g5 as the knight is now trapped, and there is nothing you can do. You cannot retreat to g2. It's covered by the bishop. If you go to f3, of course, again, just bishop captures here. The pawn cannot move. Other squares are now taken. The rook covered f5. That was the point, one of the points of rook to e5, and yeah, there's nothing to do here. 25 moves, Hans defeats a very, very strong 26-49 Grandmaster Ivan Cheparinov from Bulgaria with the black pieces. Like I said, in 25 moves. But I know some of you like it when I show you why a position is so superior. Let's say that he didn't blunder the piece here with rook to d4. Let's say he actually played something like king to f2, just unpinning, and also the knight can now go to g2 as the king also helps out with the defense. You're just going to continue with your plan of tripling up on the e-file. Let's say knight back to f3. You can even capture here, captures, and rook to e8. Look at this. Look at this. I mean, this is so massive. You have to block with rook to e4. You can simply capture. Queen will capture here. If queen captures on d6, you will play queen to e2 with check. King to g1, queen captures on b2. And now it could be a little bit tricky, but yeah, the rook is hanging. You have to move the rook. Now you're going to defend your pawns. Queen to b6 check, king g2 and g6. You will create some breathing room for your king. You defend the pawns, and now it's merely a matter of technique. And of course, Cheparinov knows that Hans has all the technique needed to win this. So let's say queen to d7. You will go rook to e2 check, and after king h3, now even c5, threatening a queen trade here. A queen trade always... winning for black, so queen c8 check, let's say, and here after you go for some sort of a slugfest here, threatening checkmate. Rook g8 check, you will deliver some checks here, and after queen captures on c5, f5, queen to g1 to defend against checkmate on h2. Sorry about that. You will play queen c2, and now there is no defense against checkmate here. So yeah, brilliantly done by Hans. 5.5 out of 6. Incredible run. We'll see if he can keep this up for the entire tournament. 3 more rounds to go. I mean, this would even be better than Fischer's result in 1970 when he played. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And if he continues his onslaught and he continues playing this powerful chess, we will of course cover all the other games as well. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Incredible stuff by Hans. I would like to thank David Gasparian, Jotem Piano on YouTube, Joe Lennox, Mehmet Haki Usali, and Karim Kawash for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of everything that's happening in the chess world, and of course, checking up on your wonderful suggestions. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.